the chapter everyone's been waiting for. We're going to do the mark of the beast, and we're going to talk about that kind of stuff, the 666 and a few things like that towards the end. Remember, last week we were in Revelation chapter 12, and in Revelation chapter 12, we really were introduced to the dragon and to Satan and what was going on during the tribulation time. And we saw behind the scenes the spiritual condition of what was going on. And this week, we're going to, the big idea this week is that Satan uses these two men, these two beasts, to deceive and rule the world. And we're going to see two main characters. One is the beast out of the sea, which is the Antichrist. And then the second half of the chapter, we see the beast from the land, and that is the false prophet. So that's what we're going to really look at tonight. And they're not called the beast out of the sea is never called the Antichrist in the book of Revelation. We get that from other portions of Scripture, but he's called lots of things. He's called the son of perdition. He's called the man of lawlessness, the little horn, Antichrist, the beast. But if I call him any of the other things, you might not know exactly what I'm talking about. But when I say Antichrist, everybody knows what I'm talking about. So a lot of times we use the word Antichrist so that you know exactly what I'm talking about, even though somebody may argue and say, well, he's never called the Antichrist in the book of Revelation. I go, well, you're right, that's true. But if I say the beast, you may not know exactly that I'm talking about the Antichrist. I could be talking about the beast of the land or the beast of the sea. So that's why I'm going to use that phrase, and I'm going to use it a lot. But we know who the characters are because from Revelation 19:20, which we'll get to in several weeks, it says this, and the beast was captured. I don't think I have this on your handout, but and with it, the false prophet who in his presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. So we have the beast and then the false prophet that is named for us. So, John, will you turn me down just a hair? I think am I a little loud or am I fine? Okay. I want to read through this. Let me read through Revelation chapter 13, and then we'll come back and we'll look at each of the verses. Okay, starting in verse 1, it says this: "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, and 10 diadems on its horns, and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like bears, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, and its mortal wound was healed. And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast." Verse 4, "And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast? And who can fight against it?' And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also it was allowed to make war on the saints and conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to the captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword, yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666. So here we see these two characters. We see that we have a beast out of the sea that we're going to look at first, beast out of the land that we're going to look at next. And both of these are called beast, but we have to remember that they don't look like beast, that this is God describing the character of these two people. Because the first one is going to be the Antichrist. And the Antichrist is going to be very alluring. It's going to be like Jesus walking on earth. It's going to attract people. Remember the white horse is the one that comes out first, and he's bringing peace, and peace is brought to the world. Most likely that is the Antichrist bringing peace. So he's the false Messiah. He's not going to be just like Satan. We talk about as a dragon or in an ugly way, but he's really an angel of light, and he's very deceiving, and he'd be somebody that we wouldn't picture as the murderer that or liar that he is. So even though we see the word beast through here, we have to remember in our mind we're seeing this ugly beast, but that's not who it is. So let's look at verse 1. Revelation 13, verse 1 says this: "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads and 10 diadems, and on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads." So we have this beast out of the sea. So this is from God's perspective. This is the character is a beast. It's outwardly deceiving. He's going to be a counterfeit. He's counterfeiting people. He's counterfeiting the Messiah. He's deceiving people is what I mean to say. So first of all, we see he's out of the sea. What does that mean? Well, as you look at commentaries and you listen to people preach on this, many will say that this means he's out of the nations or out of the Gentile nations. Because if we go to when we get to chapter 17, we see that there is the great harlot who is on many waters. And the many waters is interpreted for us in that chapter to be the peoples, nations, and languages of the world. So it's a great possibility that this he's going to come out of people because he's a person. So this is not a far stretch. And I believe he's a Gentile, so out of the Gentile nations. But I don't know if that's the exact meaning that is trying to be portrayed here. If we remember back, when the mighty angel came down and had 1 foot on the sea and 1 foot on the land, I think that was speaking of God claiming and redeeming the earth for himself with the title deed had been opened, remember, and the scroll was opened, and now he is claiming the earth for his, or it will be claimed at the end of the tribulation. So I think here what we're seeing is we're going to see 1 from the sea and 1 from the land, and it's really claiming, they're claiming the earth, and they're taking the earth as it was rightfully God's, but he is going to be the one that redeems it ultimately. But also we see, so it could be the Gentile nations. On your list, I listed 3 things out, and I gave you the third one just now. But the second one would be this. To the people of that time, and for many years, the sea was this mysterious place where it was very mysterious. They didn't know what was below the sea. It was very intimidating. There was a lot of force to that. They were at the mercy of the sea. So the depths of the sea, the abyss, was always kind of deep in that because they didn't know how deep the sea went. They didn't have sonar back in that days, right? And now that we kind of know that there's a bottom to the sea and stuff, well, is it a bottomless sea? How far does it go? So anything that comes out of the sea is coming up from that unknown, that mysterious, darkness. So it's possible that the Antichrist has a mysterious beginning. We don't know where he comes from. We don't know his history. We don't know his background, that he's this mysterious guy that comes on the scene that we don't know anything about, but he comes out of the nations, he comes out of the Gentile nations, and he rises up. And I think all 3 of these possibly could be true because they're going to, the 2 beasts are going to claim the whole world as they rule over it. So then you have the 10 horns, the 7 heads, and the 7 diadems. Well, that takes us back to the dragon, right? We saw that in chapter 12 that you had the dragon that had seven heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems. Or actually, it was 10. There was, I think there's 10 diadems. I think I wrote that wrong on here. There's 10 diadems, and there's 7 in the other one. So you have a difference between Satan having a different number of diadems because of his rule, and this one here, the focus is really on the 10. It's on these 10 nations that will be ruling, that he will be ruling with. There's 10 diadems on that. And the difference between chapter 12 was 7 diadems, one on each of the heads. This one here is diadems on the horns. So you have, and the numbers are really important, and I think the numbers when you have 7s or 10s or 12s, you got to pay attention to that because there's something behind those numbers, and a lot of times there's a significance there. 7's usually speaking of completeness, or perfection. There's a lot of 7s in the book of Revelation, so there's got to be something to that number. When you see the number 10, usually speaking of Gentile nations, Gentile government in some fashion. You see the number 12, it's usually pointing towards Israel as a nation, or the children of Israel, the number 12, or combinations of that 12. And we see, even in the book of Revelation, you have 12. Well, we saw the 12 stars last week, right? That represented, that was on the head of the woman. So and that takes us back to Genesis. And it was the 12 tribes of Israel. And so you see 12 several times in Revelation. You see it one time before chapters 21 and 22, and that's with the 12 stars. But then you get to chapters 21 and 22, and we're talking about heaven and the new heavens and new earth, and you see it quite a bit. You see 12. I think it's 9 times. I think I scratched it in here at 9 times when you get to chapters 21 and 22. So it's very significant. So these numbers are significant, and the reason I lay this down is because when we get to the end, there's going to be some numbers there, right? 666 or 666 is technically how it's written in Greek. So when you get to that number, I think there's significance there also. Well, here you have the 7 heads is speaking of this power, national power that this beast has, Antichrist has. The 10 horns, speaking of the 10-nation federation, or 10 nations, and that takes us back to Daniel. So once again, Gentile nations, the number 10, government. Is it exactly 10 that we're dealing with? Probably, but it doesn't have to be. It could just represent the fact that there's 10, that there's governments, Gentile governments that are involved in there. But I'm pretty sure it's number 10. The only problem is everybody's always looking at these combinations of 10 over in Europe. Like, is it 10? Is the 10-nation federation? Well, now it's 10. Now it's 12. Now it's 13. Now we're back down to 8. And everyone's always trying to calculate the number behind that. Well, we will. So these 10 nations, though, that we learn from Daniel, that they are really sometimes you hear the revived Roman Empire. And they are the nations that are in that area that are the revived Roman Empire, because Daniel gave us the prophecy of the Gentile nations, that there'll be Babylon, there'll be Medo-Persia, there'll be Greece, and then there'll be Rome. And then Rome kind of falls apart. But then it appears to, in the end times, Rome kind of revives itself, and you have this revived Roman Empire that has this power again. Well, it's obviously not the same Roman Empire in John's day. It's got to be different. There's 2,000 years, in between there. So what is it? Well, it's either the revived geographical area, so wherever Rome had geographically, maybe it's 10 nations from that geographical area, or it could be 10 nations that had the same philosophy as the Romans have. Just like our nation is philosophically is similar to the Romans in a representative republic, and maybe it's those kind of nations. Not sure. I think they'll know at the end after the rapture. They can tell us. It says the next one, they have 10 diadems. The difference between the beast and the dragon is the diadems are on the horns and not the heads. The 10 horns having crowns represent power given to these 10 Gentile nations that make up the revived Roman Empire in some fashion. So here we're introduced to him. He's very similar to Satan, so that means he's on the same line, gets his power from Satan, maybe indwelled by Satan himself to get his power. Not sure. Let's look at verse 2, Revelation 13, verse 2. It says, "And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like bears. Its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. So we see this leopard, bear, and lion. And now that takes us all the way back to Daniel, where we had the leopard and in the reverse order, but they had the lion, which represented Babylon, and then you had the bear, which represented Medo-Persia. You had the leopard, which represented Greece. And then you had this beast of all beasts that represented Rome. And that one's not really mentioned here. But he's mentioned these other three. So it's obviously taken us back to Daniel. But in Daniel, he's telling us about the Gentile powers that would rule the world. Here, I believe he's just saying that this beast incorporates the essence of these other Gentile nations. He's all of Babylon and all of Medo-Persia and all of Greece and all of these nations that these Gentile nations that have ruled the world at this point. He encapsulates them and fulfills them, and that he'll have the power and fierceness of those. I believe that's what is being talked about here. And it says, the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority to him. So the Antichrist is empowered by the dragon. We see that. And this is kind of even a counterfeit thing. As God would give his power and throne to Jesus, his son, right? This is the dragon giving it to the Antichrist. So you're going to see a lot of parallels, a lot of counterfeits between God and his son and the dragon and the beast or the Antichrist. He's counterfeit copying God and his son through this. And then and let's look at verse 3. And then it says, and one of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. So he has 7 heads, and the 7 heads, in chapter 17, there's a scarlet beast, which seems to be the same beast, and we're told that the 7 heads are 7 hills, or 7 mountains that the harlot is on, and it's 7 kings. So it's kind of, is that what's going on here? Is that the translation that we're to take from chapter 17 here? I don't think so. I think we're just getting a description of the Antichrist that has 7 as the perfect number or the complete number of Gentile rule and Gentile power and Gentile nations. And one of the reasons I think, otherwise, each of his heads a different king. And I don't think that's the case, because here we see one of his heads is mortally wounded. And then we're going to find out that is the beast who is mortally wounded. So it's not one of his kings is mortally wounded, but the beast is mortally wounded. This mortal wound the word in Greek is death, and so it's a deadly wound. Is he completely dead and then comes back to life, or does he appear to be dead and then counterfeits coming back to life? No one's sure on that. But it appears to be that he's mortally wounded. In Revelation 13, 12, and 14, later on in the chapter, it makes this point that the first beast whose mortal wound was healed, and then the beast that was wounded by the sword yet lived. So this is said 3 times in this chapter. So this portion, this wounding, this healing of this wound must be very important. I think he's trying to counterfeit the death of Christ and his resurrection with this mortal wound here. But it's important enough to be mentioned kind of where it doesn't need to be mentioned these other 2 times. It's still mentioned. So this beast apparently is going to have some kind of mortal wound or be killed, and then either be brought back to life, which we don't believe Satan has the power to give life, so it has to be counterfeited in some way, or Satan indwells the Antichrist to give him what appears to be life, but it's not life. It's just demonic possession, so to speak, by Christ. But there's this mortal wound. But it says, but its mortal wound was healed. So the Antichrist is seemingly killed, but is killed, but then is healed in some way. Is this resurrection? Is it he's a deceiver, right? So the idea probably is that there's some kind of deceit going on and faking the people. Because 2 Thessalonians 2, 9, 10, and 11 says this: the coming of the lawless one, that's another word, that's another name for the Antichrist, is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders. So all power, false signs, and wonders. False. He's going to come by that. So maybe this is one of them. And with all wicked deception, once again, deception, for those who are perishing because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends a strong delusion. So God even plays in, once they have fallen after Satan, he sends a strong delusion, which is really kind of strange. Why would God send a strong delusion? Well, it's possibly that they've already moved that direction and God just helps them go that direction. It's even a possibility, we haven't got to it yet, but those who take the mark of the beast, then they have a strong delusion and they go all in, and because there's no turning back once you take the mark of the beast. That they may believe what is false, it says there in verse 11. Once again, we've seen false signs and wonders, wicked deception, a strong delusion, believe what is false, in order that they may be condemned who did not believe the truth, and had pleasure in righteousness. So here it's Paul he's describing the tribulation and what's going on. And so the Antichrist, the beast, is going to deceive the people, and maybe this mortal wound, or seemingly mortal wound, is definitely a way of deceiving whether he really comes back to life or not. Then it says the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. So the world has been deceived by the Antichrist as this peacemaker in the first half, and now he's taking it to a higher level by appearing to die and come back to life, to counterfeit Jesus' death and resurrection, and does it so that the whole world sees that. I think that's probably what's going on right here. Let's look at verse 4, Revelation 13, verse 4. And they worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who can fight against it? So now they're worshiping the dragon and the beast, and it's kind of like, because the dragon's behind it, right? And once again, that's a counterfeit, because we worship the Father in heaven, and we also worship Jesus Christ. So there's very similar things to how we live our lives, is what they're trying to receive from the people during that time. They're indebted to their new world leader. He saved them. So we have to remember what's going on. Through this time, there's famine, there's war, there's pestilence and disease going on. You got about over this period to about year 5, you have about 4. If you have 8 billion people in the world, you got 4 billion dying. That's a lot of death. I was going to calculate that how many that was per day, because that's a lot of deaths, right? So sometimes we just kind of read past it, but that's a lot of death in those days, and a lot of people dying. So you have this guy that comes on the scene that seemingly saves them and is their savior, and they are indebted to him, and then he is killed, and who strikes him? We don't know. Is it the 2 witnesses that do that? We're not sure what happens or how this happens. Or is it God that does it somehow, and then he's resurrected, and that they're blaming God for all this stuff anyhow, and the 2 witnesses for all this anyhow, so they follow this beast or this Antichrist, this world leader. And then it says, and he uses the phrase, who is like the beast? Well, that's a direct counterfeit of a lot of sayings in the Old Testament, because who is like our God, right? That's what, it's a rhetorical question, that who is like our God? And nobody is, right? Nobody's like our God. And they're saying, who is like the beast? Well, there is, to them, they're thinking nobody is like the beast. Let's look at verse 5 and 6, and it says, and the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty, blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, and that is those who dwell in heaven. So he's given a mouth. The Antichrist is no longer pretending now he is now telling the world that he thinks he's God. When we see in Daniel, it talks about the little horn, had a mouth, and he was blaspheming, a prideful, arrogant mouth is what it says. And, we come across like he's some kind of a narcissistic guy, which he probably is, but he's also very well spoken. And a lot of people follow him. People listen to him. People that are in, dire straits. What's the world going to be like if you take, 4 billion people out of the world? What's things shut down? What's not working? What is working? How is he bringing everybody together? He's probably doing a very good job at that. His boasting and arrogance coincides with Daniel's description of the Antichrist, where it says the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things. And his blasphemous words are when blasphemy is claiming to be God. So he's claiming to be God at that point. It's against God, but he's claiming to be God because when he claims to be God, that is against God. And so he's blaspheming. He's claiming that he is God. He's allowed to exercise for 42 months. We see this time frame again. It's used many times. That's 42 months is 3.5 years, right? 1,260 days. It's given to us in various ways. Time, half a time. So he's exercising for that second half of the tribulation for sure. He's given control. Now the word allowed is there. And that's used several times in this chapter. So God's still making it very plain and clear that he's in charge, that he is allowing the Antichrist to have this territory. He's allowing, giving him leash, in other words, to go a little farther than he has before. Now remember, from last time, Satan's thrown out of heaven, or out of possibly the spiritual realm into the physical realm, which would be earth. So he is given reign over the earth during that last 3.5 years. But it shows that his time is limited, though it's allowed. It's only allowed for a short time. And I think that's why it says for 42 months. It is a limited time that he is allowed to have. Let's look at verse 7 and 8. And it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. So once again, he's allowed. We see the word allowed, so God's still in control, his sovereignty. The Antichrist goes from a peaceful person in the first half of the tribulation to now he is making war. Now he's claimed to be God. The temple's probably most likely been defiled at that point. He's drawn the line in the sand, and you're either on my team or you're against me. If you're against me, I'm going to persecute you. So the abomination of desolation by the Antichrist in the temple, as he persecutes the Jews, has probably happened. And Daniel 9:27 really tells us about, is one of the verses that tells us about that. Daniel 9:27 says this. And he shall make a strong covenant. He's talking about the Antichrist here, Daniel. And he shall make a strong covenant with the many for 1 week, for 1 7. What is that? That's how we know that the tribulation period from beginning to end is 7 years. From the covenant, when that strong covenant is made, the clock starts. And for the half of the 7, he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. So the second half of that 7 years, he's going to stop sacrifice and offering in the temple. And on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate until the decree end is poured out on the desolator. So we have here, and this is what is referenced by Jesus. Also, Daniel 11, it talks about the abomination of desolations, is where, and he said it was in the future. Jesus said in the future, when you see this happen, that you need to get out of Jerusalem when you see the abomination of desolations happen in the temple. Some believe that happened in 70 AD, but we know the temple was knocked down. We know Jerusalem was destroyed, but we don't have any evidence of anything where some Antichrist did something in the temple and then persecuted the Jews for 3.5 years after that. Now, there was persecution of the Jews, obviously, by the Romans, and they pushed them out. But it doesn't appear that that's what happened, because then after that, then you would have Christ come and rule on the earth, and that hasn't happened. I do believe Christ, as I said last time, he rules in our hearts, and he rules in your hearts, but he's not ruling in the hearts of the unbelievers or the unbelieving nations. that there's still many nations where it's very unruly, and Christ is not ruling, and it's out of control. And then in Daniel 7, this really talks about the Antichrist making war with the believers. 7:21 and 22, it says this: "As I looked, this horn," once again another name for the Antichrist, "made war with the saints," or the holy ones, the chosen ones, "and prevailed over them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom." So we see here that Daniel's telling us that the Antichrist is going to persecute the believers, and he's going to do that until when? Until Christ returns, until the Ancient of Days comes, until there's an end to that. That end is not, that's been going on if that happened in 70 AD, he hasn't come back yet. Jesus' coming back is going to put an end to that, so that's why I believe it's still yet future. But here it's telling us, it agrees with these verses that we looked at in 7 and 8, where he's allowed to make war on the saints. Some people say, well, you see saints here, so the church must be in the tribulation. Well, saints just mean separated ones, and there are believers going to be in the tribulation. I believe we'll be raptured out before the tribulation starts, but I believe millions will come to know Christ as their Savior during the tribulation period. If you have 8 billion people on the earth when you start the tribulation, 100 million getting saved is not, that's not out of the question, and that's still a lot of people. And that's a lot of people to persecute. And I think it could be even much more than that by the end, by the time that the 144,000 evangelize and the rest that gets done. It says in that verses 7 and 8, it says, authority was given. So once again, we see God demonstrating his sovereignty over the Antichrist, that the whole world is now under his authority, and I think that's where we get, he comes out of the sea and the other one comes out of the land. They're trying to do what Christ is going to do, but they only get a limited time to do that. They only get 3.5 years, where Christ is going to get 1,000 years. This is where that one world government comes in, and you see that he's ruling the whole world, and that as we move to this one world government, we always try to resist against it, right? But it's going to happen. It's going to happen here. We can delay it possibly. It's also the counterfeit Christ. He's counterfeiting Christ, ruling the whole earth. It says all who dwell on earth will worship it. Once again, these earth dwellers are always used for those who are unbelievers, and their focus is the earth, not spiritual things, the physical things. They will worship the Antichrist. Those who belong to God will refuse to worship the beast, but they're going to be persecuted for it. They're the ones getting persecuted. They're the ones that he's going to be warring against. And the ones who don't worship the beast, their names are written in the book of life. So it's showing ownership. The ones that God owns, the ones that are on his team, the ones that have trusted in him as Savior, are not going to worship the beast. So in this time, there's no gray area. You're either on the beast team or you're on God's team, but there's no in between. He's going to make the line very, very distinct by the time it's all said and done. Let's look at verse 9. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword, with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. So if anyone has an ear, let him hear. So he's talking to all that can listen, right? I think he's talking really to believers at this point in time because of the last phrase that's used there. Here's a call for endurance and faith of the saints. So I think that's who he's talking to. But he's not talking to the church. Now this phrase is used 8 times in the book here, and the first 7 times it's used to one of the churches. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And then it says it again, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Well, this time he's not talking to the churches. Well, why is that? Well, I think that's just another piece for us to say that the churches aren't here, that the church has been raptured out. Now, there's believers here. Why? Because these people have come to Christ after the tribulation has started. And that's who he is talking to, in my opinion, right here. And what's he doing? He's giving encouragement for those during the tribulation period to endure. That basically, if you're going to be taken captive, that's what's going to happen. You're going to go in captivity. If you're going to for those who are going to get killed by the sword, that's what's going to happen. You're going to get killed by the sword. He's not really pulling any punches. He says it's going to be bad. You're going to be taken captive and you're going to die. But here's some encouragement. I'm calling you for endurance, to have faith. Have faith. Have faith in God. This is going to be a difficult time for those who turn to Christ, but it's a more difficult time if you don't. So it's kind of, physically it's lose-lose, if you're got the mark of the beast. But if you're a believer, it's lose-win, right? You lose your life, but win eternity. And, there's persecution and death, but God will prevail ultimately, is what he's saying. Let's see here. Let's look at verse 11. Now we're it's kind of the second half of the chapter. It says, "Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon." So this second beast that rises out of the earth, it's going to be the false prophet, the spiritual leader. So he's going to work together with the Antichrist. And he will kind of be the religious leader for the Antichrist, which is the political leader or the main leader, is what we see as we work our way through the book of Revelation. But there's other beasts. So some that if they take the first beast coming out of the sea as meaning that he's coming from the Gentile nations, a lot of them say, well, the earth or land may mean the land of Canaan. So he would be coming, he's possibly Jewish, coming out of Israel. And I don't think that's the case myself, but that's logical if you've taken the first one out of the sea for Gentiles, then land for Israel. That's really the only reason for that. I don't see that, but who knows? I think that if the sea represents mysterious and unknown origins, we don't know where he's from. I think the earth may represent known origins. We know where he's from. We know his family. We know where this person has grown up, and we see where he comes from. And then I also think, number 3 on there, I think the sea and land do represent the world, and that Satan, through the 2 beasts, will allow them to rule the whole world. Then it says he has 2 horns like a lamb, or two small horns. So he has some power, but he's like a lamb. So I think that speaks of he looks harmless. He looks religious. He looks. Some people even say this is the Antichrist because of the lamb, but I don't think that's the case. I think the first beast is definitely the Antichrist. This is the spiritual leader that points everybody to the other one. This would be more like the Holy Spirit if we had the Trinity, where the dragon would be the Father, the beast, Antichrist, would be the Son, and the false prophet would be the religious leader or the Holy Spirit pointing people to that for the copy or the counterfeit of the Trinity. But he appears to be harmless and religious, but he is inspired and he speaks like a dragon. Inside, he's really a dragon. He's a dragon in sheep's clothing. We say wolf in sheep's clothing for somebody who sneaks into the church. This is a dragon in sheep's clothing. He looks like he's following God. He points people to God, but he doesn't. He points people to Satan. Let's look at verse 12. It exercises all authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose mortal wound was healed. So he doesn't have as much authority and power as the first one because he kind of has to be in his presence. He gets it from the beast. Exercises all authority. He's the right-hand man of the Antichrist. He directs people to the Antichrist. He's like the loving, peaceful ruler. He is pointing people to this, hey, go to this loving person, this loving ruler, this peaceful ruler, the Antichrist. He helps bring people in. He's the wingman for the Antichrist. He leaves the earth dwellers to worship Antichrist. And he's the mortal wound once again is mentioned in this passage, right? Whose mortal wound was healed. So it's making a big deal about that because that describes this Antichrist. He had a mortal wound, but it's been healed. Let's look at verse 13. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of the people. So he's performing signs just like Elijah did, just like the 2 witnesses did. So in front of people, so they're seeing this. He's deceiving the people thinking that this fire is from God, but it's not. Don't believe everything you see, right? By the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast. It deceives those who dwell on earth. Once again, these unbelievers, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword, yet lived. So he has them to make it. He directs in rebellion to God to make this image of the Antichrist, apparently, because it's the image of the beast is what we see. And why is that? I think it's, why not just worship the beast? Why do they make this idol? Well, I think there's several reasons. I think one is because the Bible talks so much against idol worship, and so much against likenesses and these statues and worshiping any kind of idol, that they make this idol, and so it's in direct rebellion to God and God's word in what they're doing and what He has them do. And it's most likely He places this in the temple. And this image most likely is what causes the abomination of desolations in the temple. 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 4 says this: "Let no one deceive you in any way, for the day will not come unless the rebellion comes first. And the man of lawlessness," there's another name for the Antichrist, "is revealed, the son of destruction," another word, "who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God." So either the Antichrist himself goes into the temple and claims to be God, or the image goes in there, or both. But he defiles the Jewish temple in some fashion. So I think he's highlighting this image highlights the fact that they're being rebellious against God. Let's look at verse 15. So the false prophet was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. So he gives breath to this image. The image is given the appearance of life to further deceive the people of earth, worshiping this beast and image. So how it's kind of a weird thing, right? I mean, why are they giving this image, life, so to speak? So he uses breath and it speaks, two things. Well, I think this goes back once again to Bible verses that talk about idols, right? Now, how does he do it? Does he do it with technology or demonic possession? We don't know. Technology is definitely there with AI, and who knows in another 100 years or 200 years, what's capable of happening. But the Bible many times talks about idols as being dumb idols, right? Idols that cannot speak. I mean, there's several times it talks about that. And so I think this is, once again, being directly back to, all the times, God, that you put down these idols, because when you're worshiping an idol, who are you worshiping? You're worshiping Satan, right? You're worshiping the person behind that. So here in his reign, he's going to say, okay, this is an idol, and we're going to worship this idol because before it was always put down. It was always put down by God as a dumb idol. They can't speak, and they just sit there. They're pieces of wood. They're pieces of metal. They're pieces of rock. Well, this one's not. This one moves. This one speaks. This one's not some just lump of whatever. And here's some verses that go with that. 1 Corinthians 12:2 says, "You know that when you were pagans, you were led astray to mute idols," or idols that can't speak, right? "However, you were led." And basically, Paul's saying, you were worshiping a piece of wood, but when you were a pagan. Psalm 115:5 says, "They have mouths but do not speak, eyes but do not see." Why are you worshiping these idols? You have a God who speaks. You have a God who's alive, but you worship this thing that doesn't speak. Jeremiah 10:5. "Their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk." Habakkuk 2:18 and 19. "What profit is an idol when its maker has shaped it? A metal image, a teacher of lies? For its maker trusts its own creation when he makes it speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, 'Awake,' to a silent stone," can't speak, "Arise, can this teach? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in it." So I think here it's going back to all the times that Satan took the arrows for all these idols, that was because he was behind all this, right? And they didn't speak, they didn't talk, But when somebody worshipped him, they were worshiping somebody who did, and that was Satan. So I think they all go back to this, and I think when he gets the idol to speak, it goes directly against this, and then to breathe into it or gives it life in some fashion. They begin to worship this idol that represents this image of the beast, whatever it is. I'm not sure what it is, whatever it is. So it causes those who would not worship the beast to be slain. So the dedication of the followers of the beast, it divides the line now, right? Now the line's getting divided. Now you're either going to worship the beast and you're on the beast team, or if you refuse to worship the beast, now you're going to be slain. You're going to be killed. We're going to kill you. So the lines are being drawn even more sharp there. Let's look at verse 16. It also causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of his name. So here we see the mark of the beast comes in. Now he's going to draw the lines even more, that you got to have a mark. If you're going to participate in the commerce of the day, you have to have some kind of mark on your hand or forehead. And why hand and forehead? Well, I think in that day especially, you didn't see very much skin on people, right? You saw hands, you saw foreheads possibly, and that's about all you saw. So in order to identify somebody, if you wanted to identify who they're with, or there was to be a sign on something, it would have to be on something that was available to be seen. And so earlier in chapter 7, we talked about the 144,000. Now this is a different word. They were sealed, right? They were sealed by God as theirs, and here they're marked. And the word mark here it's used, I think 7 or 8 times. It's used every time in Revelation, but one time it's used in Acts, where it talks about marking, engraving an idol, engraving or carving an idol. So this is definitely talking about carving, making a mark that's engraved in, cutting in stone, cutting in your hand, cutting in your forehead, whatever that is. So what is it going to be? Is it going to be a chip in our hand or chip in our forehead? I don't know. A lot of it depends on what technology is going on, right? We have the technology to do all kinds of stuff, but what kind of technology are they going to have halfway through the tribulation? I don't know. It may go all the way back to horses and tattoos on the hand because the chip ain't working anymore, right? So I don't think we get too worried about the chips, because you're going to have about half the people in the world gone. And I don't know how much electricity is going to be working, how much anything's going to be working, what's functioning and what's not functioning. We don't know, just have no idea. It's going to be a mess more than likely. So maybe it is going back to kind of the rudimentary things of just putting a tattoo on the hand. And with the 144,000 that were sealed, most likely it was a visible thing, but I told you it might not be, because it's more of it's spiritual. Where God's spiritual, He knows who's His, and this is but Satan's physical. One's spiritual, one's physical. Earth dwellers, physical, material. So this is most likely something physical. But could it not be? You know what? When you saw up in Canada some of the truckers that got marked, and they shut down their bank accounts in minutes. You know what I mean? So and they couldn't do anything. So it's easy to mark somebody out and shut their stuff down, and you have to prove that you're part of the deal. But I think there's probably some kind, because I think technology will probably be busted at that point in time, and there will be living with just the marks on their hands. I don't think the technology, the scanners, will even be up and running at that point in time. So let's look at verse. So it's going to be a mark. There's going to be a mark. What is the mark? It's the name of the beast or the number. So it'd be his name. We don't know who his name is, right? But we know the number. His number is 666. So it'd be having a 666, and that's why everybody's always worried about the 666. But don't worry, because we're not in the tribulation, right? And you're not in line to do anything, and you're not going to accidentally get the number. And if it's on your credit card, it's not on your hand or forehead anyhow, right? If they want to put that on your forehead, then you might ask a few more questions. we have the 666 zip code, so that's always funny when you're calling somebody and, giving them your zip code. But that's just more, people know the number. No matter who they are, they all know the number and what it is. But let's look at verse 18. It says, this calls for wisdom, right? Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666. In Greek, it says 666. It doesn't just say 6 3 times, okay? But that's fine. We can say six. We always say 666, right? We don't say 666, but we say 666. And we know what it means. It says call for wisdom and call for understanding. So I think that's talking to the people who are alive at this time of the tribulation. They need to have understanding and wisdom, and that the beast is going to be there. And who is the beast? Use your mind and reason to calculate and understand that the Antichrist is not God. He's not the Messiah. He's just a man. Now, the word calculate, this word for calculate is only used 2 times in the Bible. It's used here, but it's also used where it says count the cost before you do something and follow Jesus, right? Count the cost. And I don't think he's talking about doing an exact number count, but I think he's talking about you need to count, you need to weigh out the decision. And I think that's what's being used here. Now, could it be that with Hebrew and Latin and Greek, then the letters were also numbers. So you can take anybody's name in Latin or Greek or in Hebrew and assign numbers to the letters, and you can calculate the number of you can add them all together and see what their name adds up to. And that may be what he's talking to, but I just don't think so. That may just be an extra bonus that they get during the tribulation, that they're trying to calculate it out and say, okay, I'm not sure if that guy's the Antichrist or not, but let me calculate. Whoa, nope, he is. I got it right here. That may be it. Or it may be just, listen, he's going to fool you. So don't be fooled by this guy. He's not 777. He's 666. He's man. He's man, but he looks like God. He's a good counterfeit. Now, his name may also be able to calculate up to 666, and if that is the case, that's a bonus, but I don't think he's given it to us years in advance so that we can see, who's born and calculate it and say, okay, this guy's 666, so when he's, 30 years old, he's probably going to be the Antichrist because I looked at his number, and we always do it in English, and it doesn't really matter there, right? It's got to be in Hebrew more than likely, or Greek secondarily. So I think that's a good thing to talk about. I don't think that's the case. It says, for it is the number of man. 6 is the number of man. Why? Because man was created on the 6th day. 6 is short of being 7. 7 is the number of perfection and completion. So you don't see 6 used a lot with God and God's things, but you see 7 used a whole lot in the book of Revelation. Repeating the number 3 times emphasizes it's the man's number. It's 6. He's not just 6. He's 666. Like holy, 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 we would say of God. Holy, holy, holy. As opposed to 777, right? So the beast is the greatest man. This guy is going to be a great man. He's going to be one of the greatest. He'll be the greatest man possibly to Christ, but he's still a man. He's not God. He's 6. He's not 7. Along with Satan and the false prophet, he is 666. You have a trinity. You have 6, and the dragon, 6, the Antichrist, 6, the false prophet. They're not 777. He is the best man that can be produced, but he's still just a man. He is not complete. He's incomplete. He comes up short. So I think the number 666 is just telling us he is the fullness of man, but he's the evil man. So how about some application? I waited to the end for the application because I want to have some application from this. And it's besides don't get 666 tattooed on your forehead or hand, right? That'd be the number 1 application. But beyond that is, number 1, understand the value but limitation to government. Okay? Now, that's not the limitation of government, the limitation to government, to us, right? That government's good and is supposed to be good, right? And it's good to have, a government that organizes stuff. But we know that all government's broken and that we will never get a utopia and we'll never achieve everything we want through government. It's just a tool in this broken world to get us to move along. And there's no such thing as a Christian nation. There is no such thing as a Christian nation. There is such thing as Christians that make up a nation, and that's a good thing. If you have a nation that's full of Christians, then you have that's the best thing. But if you have any kind of religious leader that starts running things and he's going to run things his way, and that was Rome, right? Rome was a supposedly Christian nation that combined with the Roman Church. And then number two, God does allow suffering and pain even to his children. So we see he allowed this and he allowed that and he permitted this. Well, even in our time, God does allow suffering and pain. Now, God does miracles and he heals miraculously and he does step into our world and to remove some suffering and some pain. But there's a lot of it he allows. And it's because we live in a broken world, broken by sin. But he does give us promises. He does give us strength. He does give us power to get through the broken world. That all things work together for good to those who love God and to the called according to his purpose, that he can work those things together. And then number three, do not be deceived by false teachers. The whole thing of the tribulation is people are being deceived. Do not be deceived. And so for us today is don't be deceived by having a lamb speak, but it's really a dragon that comes out. That these preachers or TV preachers or prophets or whatever they want to call themselves sometimes, what is their message? What are they saying? You got to listen to it. You got to match it up with the Bible. Does it match with the Bible? And are they saying false doctrine? Or are they just saying things that we disagree with? There's a lot of things that I disagree with that may not be false doctrine, but when it's false doctrine is teaching a wrong way to heaven, that you can get to heaven other ways than Jesus, that you can be good to get to heaven, or there's another way to heaven. It's not, I try not to put down other churches that do things differently, but I will try to give you a heads up if someone's teaching wrongly. So understand the value but limitation to government. God does allow suffering and pain even in his children, and do not be deceived by false teachers. Let's just bow our heads just for a moment. And as we look at what's going on and we see the deceit that's happening in the tribulation period, boy, there's a lot of deceit that goes on in our world now. You got to be careful what you listen to. You got to be careful what you buy into. You got to be careful what you follow. You got to be careful what moves you. You got to be careful what you put number one in your life. And we've got to really listen to God's word. We got to listen to the truth, and we got to take everything we read on the internet and even news stories, and we got to balance them out with the truth. And we see what's happening during the tribulation, and the people will be deceived, and they will follow Satan, they will follow the Antichrist, they will follow the false prophet. But there are many who don't, and there are many who refuse that, and they stand firm and they endure. And I ask for you just to take an evaluation of your life. Where are you at? What is it that have you placed too much faith in the government? Are you going through some suffering and pain right now, and you're just asking some questions why? That God loves you, and he's going to help you get through that. And do not be deceived by false teachers. Listen to the word. Father, we're thankful for your goodness, for your grace, for your love and your mercy. I pray that your hand would be upon everything that's done here in this church, Lord, that you'd give us wisdom as leaders and guidance, that we would preach your word and preach your truth, Lord. And, Lord, that people would see Jesus Christ, and they would see the true Messiah. They would see salvation is only through Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone and no other way. And that we give you the praise and we give you the glory, and we worship Jesus Christ and him alone. It's in your name we pray. Amen.